2 hours ago, the battlefield is covered in death as Akui continues his ruthless attack on the Blade God's 6 martial clan, cutting down every warrior with overwhelming power. After the battle ends, he lets out a tired sigh and believes he has finally killed them all. Even though they are his enemies, he feels guilty for taking so many lives. He thinks about a certain man and wonders whether this massacre eases even a small part of that man's anger. As cold rain washes the blood from his face, the Blade God suddenly appears behind him. Akui fails to sense him until the Blade God says this is exactly what he expects from the great war god of the East. He comments that even with one injured arm, a battalion cannot defeat Akui. Looking toward the lake, he says the creature that fell into it must be the white tiger, noting that it has grown much larger since they last met. He recalls that the Time Patrol once prevented him from killing the tiger himself, and casually adds that from Akui's point of view, that event happened about 100 years ago. Akui instantly turns to face him. The Blade God asks how it feels to personally slit an old friend's throat. Those words make Akui lose control. He attacks with all his strength and rage, but despite the endless barrage, the Blade God remains completely unharmed. Akui realizes this man is responsible for all his suffering. The monster who killed the white tiger cub and his dear friend Sakyang. Gathering every bit of strength into one punch, he creates a massive explosion that sends stone flying everywhere. When the dust clears, the Blade God still stands without a scratch. Akui curses the monster, knowing ordinary attacks can never close the gap. He pushes beyond his limits as a dark aura surrounds him, and his glowing eyes shine with terrifying power. He unleashes his ultimate technique, the Absolute Void Fist, death by a single blow. The attack strikes the Blade God at incredible speed, trapping him inside a vortex of destructive energy. The shockwave covers nearly a quarter of the mountain, and tears a huge trench through the ground. Completely exhausted, Akui struggles to breathe as his body shakes from the recoil. Suddenly, a ghostly skull made of energy appears before him, carrying the same evil pressure Yoan once senses. Before Akui can react, the Blade God counters with a precise strike that cuts through his arms and even slices the huge rocks behind him. Horrified, Akui wonders what kind of power this is, but before he finishes speaking, one of his arms is cleanly severed. As Akui screams in pain, the Blade God admits he is impressed that someone reaches such a level through pure training alone. However, he says he has no more time because he has an appointment. Returning to the present, the Blade God stands before Yoan and says it has been a long time before correcting himself, saying it is better to say he is pleased to finally meet the demon god. Yoan is shaken because he cannot sense anything from him. The man seems perfectly united with nature and completely empty of emotion. Yoan recognizes him as the legendary master who fought the sword demon and traveled from the future into the past. As Yoan begins to speak, the Blade God stops him, raises one hand and stomps the ground. The earth shatters in a perfect circle 5 to 6 meters wide. Yoan recognizes the remaining energy as the war god's Absolute Void Fist. The Blade God sighs and explains that although he spreads the attack's energy through his body, some discomfort still remains. He admits this is the first time he has seen someone reach such heights using only bare fists. Nearby, Akui remains standing even though he is dead, his body refusing to fall like a deeply rooted ancient tree. The Blade God looks at him with admiration, saying Akui's pride reminds him of the great ancestor and the cult's ancient patriarch. Yoan feels sick because the Blade God speaks as if he personally knows the heavenly demon. Since Yoan respects Akui as a worthy opponent, these empty words sound like mockery. Angered, Yoan says the Blade God enjoys listening to himself. Looking at the rain, the Blade God says it is unfortunate Yoan feels that way, but he understands because he has lived so long that all his human emotions have disappeared. Yoan suddenly notices the raindrops never touch him. They simply slide away from an invisible layer of air. The Blade God reflects that time changes rivers, mountains, and even the fiercest storms. When Yoan asks what he means, the Blade God says their positions are completely different. He finds it refreshing that Yoan still has human emotions, unlike the true demon god he once was. Yoan replies that the Blade God talks as though they have known each other despite meeting for the first time. The Blade God says he always wonders what standing on the same level as Yoan would feel like, and now he knows. His face darkens into something terrifying as he admits he does not even feel the desire to fight Yoan because nobody wants to fight a fly. They are only annoyed by it. In an instant, he appears directly before Yoan without using any visible technique, as if the space between them disappears. He quietly says Yoan once feels the same way. Before Yoan understands what happens, the Blade God kicks him away. Yoan slides across the ground before stopping, his arm shaking from the impact. Although the kick looks casual, its force is overwhelming. Even with the nano suit, the shockwave shakes his entire body. The Blade God instantly appears again and says Yoan is not bad because that kick is meant to completely break his arm. He follows with a crushing overhead kick toward Yoan's head. Yoan blocks with crossed arms, causing a huge explosion of chi, but he realizes the Blade God's strength is beyond reason. This attack is 3 times stronger than the previous one. Even with 10th Mastery Chi, he cannot hold his defense. The ground collapses, the kick breaks through his guard, and the explosion sends Yoan flying. He nearly loses consciousness as Nano reports that both his arms are broken and self-regeneration has begun. Looking at him, the Blade God is surprised the armor survives and realizes it is no ordinary equipment. After examining it, he asks how Yoan possesses armor made with future technology. Yoan immediately retreats and creates a formless blade. The Blade God notices the black flames and mockingly says using 2 types of true chi together as a trick he has never tried. Yoan fires several formless blades, but the Blade God easily dodges some and deflects the rest with his bare fists. Yoan forms another formless blade and is shocked that it is blocked by bare hands. Smiling slightly, the Blade God admits he is also surprised after recognizing the combination of the Supreme Saber Divine Martial Arts and the Heavenly Demon Sword Art. He thinks the technique is even better than expected. While blocking every attack, he says he now understands why the Blade Master struggles against Yoan. Refusing to give up, Yoan gathers his strength again and tells the Blade God to witness his power. He then activates the first technique of the Demon God Sword Art, the Void Destruction Sword. Ominous chi swirls violently in front of Blade God like a huge tornado. Blade God raises his hand and says he will see if this is truly interesting. He covers his hand with dense chi, blocks Yoan's dark red and black chi, and throws a lightning-fast punch into the vortex, completely scattering the energy. Yoan is shocked as he stares at Blade God's hands, which are covered with the remaining red and black chi. Blade God says Yoan does not disappoint because he forces him to use both hands. Yoan cannot believe that his opponent uses a blade technique with his bare hands to stop his Demon God Sword Art. Blade God then says it is Yoan's turn and challenges him to block the next attack. He swings his golden chi-covered hand downward and sends a terrifying formless blade at Yoan. Yoan quickly creates 3 formless blades in front of himself to block it. He realizes how unbelievably sharp the incoming chi is and wonders if it is truly a formless blade. The attack crashes into Yoan's 3 blades and pushes him backward. Yoan is horrified because he is actually being forced back. He realizes this single attack is stronger than both of his true chi types combined. Blade God's formless blade easily destroys his defenses and slices diagonally across his chest. The attack continues through his body and destroys everything behind him. Yoan coughs up blood and suffers serious injuries. Nano immediately begins repairs but reports that the gadolinium nanosuit's durability has dropped by 9%. It detects severe internal injuries and starts accelerated healing, but suddenly warns that a strange formless energy is blocking the recovery process. Yoan curses as he realizes the enemy's blade chi slips through a crack in his suit. Enduring terrible pain, he feels the foreign energy spreading through his body and knows he must remove it quickly. Blade God says that after fighting all day, Yoan no longer has enough true chi to remove his blade chi and mockingly suggests he may have no energy left at all. Breathing heavily, Yoan realizes Blade God has been watching him the entire time. Blade God calmly explains that weakening an enemy first is the most basic tactic, even if the enemy is only a mere fruit fly. Yoan admits he is right and says Blade God has completely cornered him. Blade God strangely replies that he learned this from Yoan. Confused, Yoan asks how that is possible since this is their first meeting. Blade God admits he never planned to meet him here. He explains that after so much time, his feelings toward Yoan disappear, but Yoan grows stronger much faster than history records, making him curious. He adds that others probably think the same way. Looking at the nanosuit, he says he wonders why Yoan is wearing armor made with future technology, and concludes that the demonic cult must survive into the future. Yoan is stunned that Blade God figures out so much just by seeing Nano. Blade God then says something is strange, because although Yoan has future technology, they seem unaware of it. Surprised, Yoan asks who they are. Blade God says it is disappointing because if he could hack the armor, he would gladly steal it. Deciding the conversation is over, he suddenly releases an overwhelming wave of power. Yoan feels the terrifying pressure and wonders if Blade God is about to use the same attack again. Before he can finish thinking, Blade God instantly appears behind him and quietly says he should finish what started earlier. Blade God reaches for the essence core, surrounds his hand with chi and tries to cut the threads holding it. Before he succeeds, Yoan suddenly releases the same formless blades that had struck his armor earlier. Blade God easily blocks the returned attack without any concern. Surprised, he realizes it is his own blade chi and admits Yoan still has some true chi left. He tells Yoan it is a good attempt, but it is not enough. Yoan immediately throws another formless blade at Blade God's face, using even more of his remaining chi, and says it is now Blade God's turn to block. He launches the attack with his last strength, but Blade God simply raises his hand and effortlessly deflects it. Yoan is shocked and realizes this space-destroying technique is the same one the Combat Divine uses but even stronger. Calling Blade God a bastard, Yoan gathers every bit of strength he has left. He knows he cannot let the battle continue and decides he must kill Blade God now by using every remaining drop of true chi. With that desperate resolve, he releases another enormous wave of chi. Blade God is surprised by its power but continues blocking. Even as his hand begins to break apart and he is pushed backward, he releases even more power. Brilliant golden chi surrounds him. Yoan's purple chi rushes past both sides of him, and as one stream nearly reaches his neck, Blade God draws even deeper on his power. He transforms, causing a massive explosion of energy that shoots into the sky and pierces the clouds. Yoan finally runs out of energy and stands before his enemy, gasping for breath. Blade God's hand is still covered with Yoan's dark red and black chi. Yoan realizes that even the Blade Master could not block this attack, yet Blade God stops it without moving. Nano suddenly warns that Yoan's energy has fallen below 1%. Terrible pain spreads through his body, making him scream in agony, as he realizes every part of him is breaking down because he uses far too much true chi. Meanwhile, the Blade God stares at his burning hand and is surprised that it does not heal because a dark energy keeps dispersing his spirit chi. He uses his golden chi to purify the wound, and his 2 destroyed fingers quickly regenerate. He tells Yoan that he is even stronger than the combat divine and forced him to use far more effort than expected, but declares that the fight ends now. He points 2 fingers forward, creating a sharp invisible attack that pierces straight through Yoan's chest. Yoan feels something tear through his body, trembles violently, coughs blood and falls face first to the ground. The Blade God walks over and tells him that he can never remove that energy from his body because he has already exhausted all his true chi. Gasping for breath, Yoan wonders what has pierced him. The attack feels nothing like ordinary chi. Instead, it seems to cut through his very will. As Yoan lies helpless, the Blade God slashes with his chi-covered hand, making what looks like Yoan's head fly away. In truth, it is his essence core rolling across the ground while looking exactly like a severed head. The Blade God mocks him, saying that watching the feared demon god shake in pain and fear while dying is a wonderful sight. Wearing a cruel smile, he admits he has not felt such joy in a long time. Nearby, the armless Akui watches everything. Inside his mind, he believes he cannot move and accepts that he is dying, expecting to meet his fallen companions. Suddenly, Sakyong and the Wind-White Tiger speak to him, saying they have never seen him so weak. They ask how he can give up while the man who killed them is still alive and remind him that he promised to carry their hatred. Shocked, Akui asks if they have come to greet him. The scene splits into 2 worlds, one bright where Sakyong and the Wind-White Tiger stand and one dark where Akui remains. They tell him that it is not his time and that he still has something to do. The Wind-White Tiger urges him to destroy their enemy for their sake. Akui says both his arms are gone, but the White Tiger asks if he has forgotten something important. Back on the rainy mountain, the Blade God senses a change and turns toward Akui. After a long silence, Akui stomps the ground, shattering the earth as powerful chi explodes around him. The Blade God calls him remarkably determined, saying he expected him to die and wonders what still drives him. Akui breathes heavily without answering. The Blade God asks if he has forgotten that he has no arms and says the battle is already over. After a moment, Akui gasps that his friends remind him to carry their burden and keep moving forward. At that instant, Sakyong and the Wind-White Tiger place their fists against his back and encourage him. Akui releases all his power, twists his body, and performs the motion of throwing a punch. Although he has no arms, the Blade God raises his hand to block and says he will truly kill him this time. Before he finishes speaking, God arises. Chi suddenly takes physical form as a giant fist and flies forward. Akui's invisible punch slams into the Blade God's chest, making him spit blood and sending him flying several meters before he stops himself. Shocked, he still feels the impact and realizes the attack closely resembles the technique he used on Yoan. He understands that it is the Mind Fist. Barely conscious, Akui confirms he is right and says physical arms do not matter because a man's true fist is his unbreakable will engraved into his soul. Remembering his fallen friends and more than 100 years of training through rain and snow, he smiles faintly and silently thanks them because he can throw one final punch with everything he has. The combat divine Akui dies standing without ever falling. The Blade God becomes furious, veins bulging as he curses Akui for dying with such a satisfied expression. Suddenly, he coughs up a large amount of blood. Looking at the blood on his hand, he angrily wonders how anyone dares humiliate him. The Mind Fist works much like his own attack on Yoan. It crushes an enemy's will while secretly destroying the body from within. His entire body shakes violently, forcing him to vomit more blood. Enraged, he cannot accept suffering such an ultimate attack from someone who is neither the heavenly demon nor the demon god. Realizing the danger, he decides to remove the Mind Fist's energy first, and immediately circulates his internal chi as a powerful aura surrounds him. The pain feels as if an invisible hand is crushing his heart. He curses Akui because the attack contains such powerful will that it cannot be removed easily. He realizes that natural energy is too slow and decides to use the spiritual chi of the White Tiger's essence core instead. However, when he grabs the core, he freezes in shock because it contains no energy. Looking toward the motionless Yoan a few meters away, he briefly wonders if the impossible has happened. He quickly rejects the thought, believing Yoan could never absorb the core's energy while fighting. Even so, because Yoan is the legendary demon god, he walks toward him to make sure. Yoan lies completely still with his back facing the blade god and appears unconscious. Inside his mind, Nano reports that synchronization has reached 98%. Fully awake, Yoan urgently tells Nano to hurry because the enemy is only 2 steps away. Nano calmly says the analysis of the gadolinium energy is complete, and the system is converting it into Yoan's own power. Before the duel, Yoan successfully removes the White Tiger's essence core. Feeling its powerful spiritual chi, he thinks the extraction is successful. Nearby, the White Tiger lies defeated with a huge hole in its chest where the core once rests. Yoan thinks losing an essence core must feel like a human losing a dantian, but believes it is better for him to take it than let the enemy have it. He asks Nano if the Nano suit can absorb the spiritual chi just as it previously absorbs the dragon turtle's lightning chi. Nano confirms that gadolinium is ideal for absorbing both energy and shock. Expecting a dangerous battle, Yoan prepares this hidden trump card and orders Nano to analyze the energy during absorption. Nano obeys and begins transferring the essence core's energy into the Nano suit, starting at only 1%. Back in the present, Nano announces that synchronization reaches 100%. Instantly, an overwhelming burst of brilliant energy erupts and completely surrounds Yoan. Seeing this, the blade god gasps in shock and demands to know what is happening. Yoan quickly jumps backward and creates some distance. Nano informs him that the suit is converting the stored essence core energy into his own energy, and the process reaches 3%. The blade god senses spiritual chi coming from the mechanical armor and wonders if it absorbs the White Tiger's core. Confused, he thinks that even the legendary 10 millennia frost metal cannot absorb pure spiritual chi. A frightening idea enters his mind as he wonders if the strange suit comes from a future beyond even his own era. He immediately rejects the thought, throws away the empty essence core, and angrily declares that he will never let the demon god gain the White Tiger's power because immortality belongs only to him. He gathers powerful chi for a deadly attack and mocks Yoan, saying that he never intends to stand by while Yoan absorbs the spiritual chi. Yoan answers by creating a deadly formless blade and throws it at him. The blade god is surprised that Yoan recovers so much true chi so quickly. He destroys the blade with his chi-covered hand and declares that such tricks cannot defeat him. Yoan instantly fires 2 more blades, but the blade god destroys them as well. Yoan curses inwardly, disappointed that his attacks fail even though his enemy is badly injured. He realizes the difference in strength is still enormous. His body trembles as he forces himself beyond his limit. Struggling to breathe, he knows the hostile blade chi attacking his heart is becoming a serious problem. Although the suit's spiritual chi helps him recover a little, he knows he cannot continue a long battle unless he removes the invading energy. Before he can react, the blade god reaches him in an instant. Yoan instinctively attacks with his right hand toward the blade god's head, but the older master blocks it with his mana-covered hand and grabs Yoan's arm so tightly that it nearly breaks. Standing before him, the blade god mocks him, saying that absorbing a little spiritual chi is not enough to defeat him. Yoan tries to strike with his left hand using his remaining chi, but the blade god slices it off with a hand strike. The severed hand flies away as Yoan screams in agony and falls to his knees, struggling to breathe. Looking down on him, the blade god declares that if he represents humanity, then Yoan is nothing more than a tiny fruit fly. However, he suddenly coughs up blood because the wound Akui inflicts has never healed. He realizes the combat divine's final attack is still damaging him from within, and knows he must remove the foreign energy. He decides to steal Yoan's spiritual chi to heal himself while also preventing Yoan from fully absorbing the White Tiger's power. Gathering massive chi, he declares that he will destroy the Nano suit and take its energy. As he attacks Yoan's head, a sudden feeling of danger shocks him. A moment before the strike lands, Yoan orders Nano to act. A brilliant burst of energy surrounds him as Nano releases a huge shockwave using 5% of the stored spiritual chi. The blast throws the blade god through the air, making him spit blood while trying to regain control. At the same time, Akui's mind fist tightens around his heart, forcing him to scream. Yoan takes the chance and creates 3 deadly formless blades that surround the helpless blade god. He knows this is his final opportunity, while the lingering technique keeps the supreme saber god frozen. Horrified, the blade god wonders how anyone can control all 4 kinds of true chi at once. Yoan roars for the blades to kill his enemy. The blade god quickly forms a dense chi shield that blocks the attacks. The blades crash against the barrier, and he realizes Yoan is forcing him to use a defensive technique. He knows that even one direct hit could kill him despite his immortality. Meanwhile, Yoan reaches his limit after fighting many powerful enemies. gasping for air. He reminds himself that this is the chance Akui sacrifices his life to create. He shouts that he will never waste it. Cracks spread across the Blade God's shield. In disbelief, the Blade God wonders how Yoan still releases so much true chi with Blade Chi lodged in his heart. Sweating heavily, he roars and calls Yoan the demon god as the shield finally shatters. A massive explosion lights up the mountaintop and is visible from far away. The blast throws Yoan backward. He crashes onto the ground while a huge crater appears where the Blade God stands. Nano urgently warns that Yoan's heart is severely damaged and his life is in critical condition. As emergency recovery begins, Nano reports that an unknown energy is preventing the heart from healing. Barely conscious, Yoan weakly asks what happens to the Blade God. A painful scream suddenly echoes through the air. As the dust clears, the Blade God is still standing despite losing a huge part of his torso. He howls in terrible pain, spits out large amounts of blood and screams with hatred, calling Yoan the demon god. Blood pours endlessly from the destroyed right side of his body, making it impossible to understand how he is still alive. Shocked, Yoan wonders if the man is truly immortal. The Blade God uses his power to stop the bleeding and thinks that after absorbing all 5 sacred beast cores and becoming immortal, he still cannot understand the strange black energy stopping his regeneration. He realizes he must remove it immediately and screams with all his strength, cursing Akui and saying that the combat divine's mind fist continues to interfere until the very end. Seeing the chance, Yoan gathers all his remaining chi into one final formless blade. Nano warns that using more energy is dangerous, but Yoan tells Nano not to worry and simply help him. He knows this is the last of his true chi, but it is enough to pierce the Blade God's heart. He launches the formless blade, but before it reaches its target, Yoan steps forward and deflects the attack. Barely staying conscious, Yoan sees the Blade God and curses. A shocked Yoan turns to the Blade God and anxiously asks if he is alright. He thinks he had always believed his master could defeat the demon god easily, and never expected to see him so badly injured. Looking at the wound, he wonders why it is not healing and questions what the strange black energy is. Yoan steps forward and offers to remove the black energy, but the Blade God refuses and orders him to kill the demon god immediately. Yoan lies motionless on the ground looking unconscious. Yoan hesitates and says that if his lord does not recover soon, the situation will become dangerous. The Blade God angrily repeats that he must do it now. Yoan thinks he has never seen his master so shaken or filled with such overwhelming killing intent. Looking back at Yoan, he wonders if the demon god has become strong enough to push the Blade God to his limit. Believing that is true, he decides he must kill Yoan and promises to obey the order. Yoan's sword bursts into flames, and his aura changes until he resembles a blazing fire dragon. He remarks that it has been a long time since he last used this power. Yoan lifts his head with difficulty and struggles to breathe. Yoan says his lord is right and rushes at him at full speed. Unable to move, Yoan wonders if this is the end. Excited to kill the demon god, Yoan shouts that Yoan must die here. Before the sword reaches him, a huge wall of solid ice suddenly rises in front of Yoan. He strikes it, but the ice does not crack at all. While he is stunned, a powerful artifact flies toward him, and he quickly blocks it with his sword. The weapon belongs to Cheon. The clash creates a huge shockwave that throws both of them backward. Yoan demands to know who he is. Cheon introduces himself as the great elder of the heavenly demon divine cult. Yoan is surprised that someone this powerful exists in the demonic cult. He admits Cheon is strong but says he has no time to waste. He creates several fireballs and throws them at him. Cheon blocks them with his artifact, though with great effort. Yoan instantly rushes forward. Cheon attacks again, but Yoan avoids the strike and charges straight toward Yoan, declaring that the demon god's life ends now. Suddenly another figure appears in front of him, hits him directly, and sends him flying. It is ManhwaCapped who attacks at full speed. They exchange fierce blows until Yoan is forced into a difficult fight. ManhwaCapped jumps back and creates some distance. Yoan nervously recognizes him as the Dark King. ManhwaCapped draws his sword and declares that anyone who touches the cult leader dies by his hand. Yoan thinks that if even the Dark King is here, the situation has changed. He then sees more people rushing toward them. They are Yoan's subordinates. They gather around Yoan and ask if he is alright, while Cheon and ManhwaCapped stand in front of Yoan ready to fight. The men are shocked to see the cult leader in such terrible condition. They notice his missing hand slowly regenerating. Hyobong says it is probably because Yoan absorbed the essence cores of the fire Kirin and the dragon turtle. Yoan realizes that he might have managed if only Cheon had arrived. But now everyone is here. Even he is in danger. Regretfully, he decides to retreat. Nearby, Yoan's grandfather suddenly leaps into the air and rushes toward the Blade God. He thinks that anyone still alive after losing a quarter of his body cannot be human. Realizing this man nearly killed Yoan, he decides this is the perfect chance to eliminate such a dangerous enemy while he cannot move. Pointing his sword at the Blade God, he declares that he will kill him with one strike. Gulwon notices him only at the last moment and desperately screams. Yoan's grandfather prepares the third technique of the heavenly demon sword arts, but before he can strike, the mummy Wanol suddenly appears and rescues the blade god. Gulwon feels greatly relieved that the blade god is saved. Yoan's other followers immediately chase after them, but Gulwon blocks them by creating a massive wall of fire. They stop, cough, and wonder what is happening. Gulwon thinks his timing is perfect because the blade god would have been in great danger otherwise. He retreats behind Wanol and the blade god. While escaping, he turns back and shouts that those demonic cult bastards should not think this battle is over. Marikium and Jokeron-dan immediately chase after them. Hyobong tells everyone to follow the head guardian and the great elder and not let them escape. Suddenly, Mungyu screams Yoan's name in panic. Everyone turns toward her and asks what happened. Crying and shaking, she says the cult leader is no longer breathing. Yoan lies on the ground as if dead. Hearing this, Yoan's grandfather rushes over at incredible speed and asks what she means. Hyobong refuses to believe it and insists it must be a mistake because Yoan is only seriously injured. Mungyu explains that the light has disappeared from his body and that his hand has completely lost its strength. Holding his hand tightly, she tearfully repeats that he has stopped breathing. His grandfather tells everyone to let him check. He places a finger beneath Yoan's nose but feels no breath. Terror fills him. His body trembles violently. He stumbles backward and collapses in shock. With a shaking voice, he confirms that Yoan is truly not breathing and cries it out across the battlefield. All of Yoan's followers are left in complete shock and despair. Baek Ji shouts that Yoan cannot die so easily. Hyobong desperately argues that it must only be a serious injury. Mungyu agrees and insists they cannot let him die. She says she will transfer her true chi into him. However, Yoan's grandfather stops her, shakes his head and says she must not do that. She breaks down in tears and soon everyone else begins crying as heavy rain falls from the sky. Deeply in love with Yoan, Mungyu looks at him through her tears and asks how she is supposed to live if he leaves her behind like this. Before she can finish speaking, Yoan's body suddenly glows with radiant chi. He rises into the air, leaving everyone in complete shock. Different elemental chi pours from his body and wraps around him, sealing him inside a huge glowing sphere of energy. His grandfather immediately realizes that this is the five-colored energy of the five sacred beings within Yoan. He clearly recognizes the fire chi of the fire Kirin, the cold chi of the great Pong, the wind chi of the wind-white tiger, and the lightning chi of the dragon turtle. One of Yoan's subordinates asks the supreme heavenly demon what is happening. The grandfather laughs and says he always knows Yoan would not die so easily. He explains that Yoan seems to be going through a complete metamorphosis. However, a dark and frightening energy suddenly begins wrapping around the sphere. Hyobong is shocked as the black energy starts absorbing the power of the five sacred beings. Yoan's grandfather wonders if it is the legendary heavenly demon Chi. He believes the final sacred being should be the earth dragon Muggy, but since the heavenly demon Chi is replacing it, it may be struggling to balance with the other four powers. Soon, the black aura completely swallows Yoan, turning into something like a giant black hole. Feeling the danger, a subordinate orders everyone to move away so they do not interrupt the demon lord's transformation. He asks the grandfather what is really happening, but the grandfather admits he does not know and says they can only watch and hope Yoan survives. Deep inside the swirling black aura, Yoan senses an enormous flow of chi unlike anything he has ever experienced. He cannot see, touch, or smell it, but he instinctively knows it exists. His skin slowly returns to the color of a living person, and he hears a powerful heartbeat. Since his own heart should have been destroyed by the mind blade, he wonders where the sound comes from. Then he realizes it is not only his own heartbeat. He can hear the heartbeat of every living creature. It is the combined rhythm of all life in the world. He feels the pure energy of all existence and the endless flow of nature. He understands that the spiritual chi inside the essence core is only a small part of great nature, and all these different energies are creating perfect harmony. He also realizes his own energy is part of nature. It is not meant to stay trapped inside a body but should flow freely so he can become one with everything. At that moment, his body starts changing, and glowing yellow cracks spread across his face. He notices that instead of the five sacred beings simply balancing each other, the dominant heavenly demon Chi is spreading into the other four elements. He feels this is actually a good thing. Suddenly, he experiences the terrible pain of a blade piercing straight through his heart. He realizes the Supreme Saber God's mind blade is still trying to kill him during his transformation, but he also senses that its remaining will is steadily weakening. Meanwhile, the destroyed right side of the blade god fails to regenerate. Yoan grabs the phantom sword in his chest and tells himself he cannot waste this chance. He focuses all his strength and commands the mind blade to leave his body. The sword slowly begins to crack. Declaring that this is his heart, he releases his true power and completely destroys the blade, then declares that this is his body and only his own will controls it. Outside, Mengyu stares at the giant energy sphere in disbelief. A massive explosion suddenly shakes the area, making Hyobong ask what happened. Wang He tells him to look ahead, and everyone, including Yoan's grandfather, watches in amazement. Wang He realizes the demon lord's power has split the sky apart. Even after the explosion, Yoan remains safely inside the glowing sphere. His grandfather mutters that the attack is definitely Blade Chi. He wonders if it has been inside Yoan all along and questions who the Blade God truly is, since he survives in such a condition and even uses Blade Chi, which is completely different from the formless blade. Nearby, cult members notice the black sphere shrinking and call everyone to look. The sphere slowly disappears, covering Yoan in demonic chi. He absorbs all of it, leaving everyone shocked because he now seems completely different, like an endless void. The heavenly demon sword suddenly appears before him. The cult members watch in shock as the sword moves by itself. Yoan remains unconscious in the air while the sword floats before him, causing the cult members to worship him like a god. His grandfather wonders if this phenomenon is connected to Yoan's heavenly demon chi. Suddenly, the sword flies into Yoan's hand. Yoan finds himself inside a dark, empty space where he feels nothing. The great natural energy he sensed moments ago has vanished. The place feels similar to when he enters the memories of the heavenly demon sword and the cold ice staff, yet it is also different. Everything is dark instead of bright, and unlike the past illusions, this place feels completely real. He calls for Nano, but there is no answer. Realizing he is trapped alone again, he concludes that after fully understanding the principles of great nature, the heavenly demon Chi overwhelms the mythical creature's energies and pulls him back into this mental world. Suddenly, someone walks up behind him and comments that he is not bad. Yoan's eyes widen as he turns and sees a man standing there. The stranger says he expects nothing less from his own descendant. Yoan recognizes him as the same man he sees fighting the black dragon when he enters the cavern during his mission as a Yoan's man. The man explains that absorbing all this energy takes time, though it is no longer his responsibility. Yoan remembers seeing him inside the mind realm through the heavenly demon sword. He feels an endless demonic aura and the dignity of a true leader coming from him, and wonders if the man is speaking to him. As if reading his mind, the man asks who else could be there. Shocked, Yoan asks if he is the founding heavenly demon. The man smiles and says Yoan is not as foolish as he thought. Yoan introduces himself as the 24th leader and respectfully greets the great founder of the heavenly demon divine cult. The founder tells him to stop being so formal because he is only a fragment containing the will of the person Yoan believes him to be. He explains that he is simply the will placed inside the heavenly demon sword. Yoan realizes he would not have understood this before, but after reaching enlightenment through great nature and experiencing the Mind Blade and Mind Fist, he finally understands. The founding heavenly demon praises his intelligence and says that is probably why Yoan reaches this realm of nothingness much sooner than expected. When Yoan humbly thanks him, the founder says there is no need for humility because only someone extremely talented can fully embrace demonic aura and complete the demonic path. Surprised, Yoan asks about the demonic path. The founder wonders if Yoan truly never realizes it despite everything he has done. He releases his power, surrounding himself with dark aura, and explains that the hatred and resentment of the dragon that fails to ascend to heaven pierce the heavens and become demonic energy, creating the foundation of the demonic path. Yoan realizes heavenly demon chi is not simply dark energy, but the spiritual chi of a fallen mythical creature. That explains why it feels similar to the energy of the wind-white tiger. He briefly wonders if the wind-white tiger has two essence cores because the one he receives remains in its original form, but he quickly sets the thought aside. He asks if the founder intentionally corrupts the emugi instead of sealing it. The founding heavenly demon confirms this and says it is unfortunate for the dragon, but he has no other choice. He promises to explain everything later because there is still much to discuss, and very little time. He creates an image of the blade god with his chi. Yoan recognizes him at once and admits he never knows the founder is watching everything through the sword. The founder tells him not to feel embarrassed and praises him for reaching logical conclusions despite the great difference in their martial skill. Yoan asks if the founder also fights the blade god and whether the traces in the abandoned sword valley come from that battle with the supreme saber god. The founder is surprised by the valley's name but confirms they fight there. He says the blade god uses completely different martial arts unlike anything he has ever seen, although the man's techniques are still crude because he has only begun to understand chi. Yoan accepts this even though the founder speaks of the supreme saber god like a child. He knows the being before him is a living legend who reaches the mystic realm at 18, surpasses every strongest warrior in Murim, and becomes the greatest and most invincible figure in history. The founding heavenly demon says he believes he kills the blade god by piercing his head with a sword, so seeing him return far stronger than before is deeply troubling. Yoan suggests that perhaps the blade god already possesses an essence core at that time. The founder agrees and says the blade god must be the person mentioned in an ancient prophecy. When Yoan asks about it, the founder explains that a prophet long ago foretells that the divine cult will face a terrible threat in the distant future, and that an immortal will destroy all of Murim. He first doubts this because humans cannot live forever regardless of their martial realm, but he later considers that an extraordinary method may exist. After studying many ancient records about the 5 sacred creatures, he becomes certain that absorbing all their spiritual chi grants immortality. Because of this, he prepares 3 plans. Yoan asks what they are. The founder says the first plan is preventing anyone from obtaining the essence cores, but it fails because a new one appears whenever another disappears. The second plan is for either himself or one of his successors to become immortal and stand equally against the enemy. When Yoan asks why he never does it himself despite being the strongest, the founder laughs and calls it a foolish question. He explains that he cannot remain the leader forever, and since no one in his era equals him, there is no reason to wait endlessly. Yoan says history records that the founder ascends to immortality after reaching the Tao. The founder says that story is acceptable, but he believes a successor should attempt the second method because keeping a mythical creature inside the cult could create internal conflict. Instead, he develops another method and treats it as a challenge. When Yoan asks if it is connected to heavenly demon chi, the founder confirms it. He says he wants to kill the immortal to prove that absolute immortality does not exist. He realizes only demonic chi can oppose the divine spiritual power of mythical creatures. Yoan finally understands, and the founder says this is how the demonic path begins. Although members of the heavenly demon cult are called demonic people because they worship the heavenly demon and the demon god, they never truly seek evil energy. Yoan realizes this differs from what he always believes. The founding heavenly demon explains that human hatred, anger, killing intent, and cruelty alone can never reach the true demonic path. Therefore, he prevents spiritual creatures from ascending by changing their sacred spiritual energy into hatred, rage, and destructive intent. He tells Yoan that he inherits his will and gains the Emugi's demonic spiritual energy, but an incomplete demonic path can never completely destroy an immortal. Thinking about the blade god, Yoan admits this is true. The founding heavenly demon tells him not to lose hope because he has now completed the true demonic path. With his current power, he can destroy everything. The ancestor summons back the demonic sword and says it is finally time for the real lesson. Since Yoan proves himself, he will now teach him the correct way to use heavenly demon chi. Yoan grips the sword tightly and wonders what the correct way means, questioning whether everything he has done until now is wrong. The founding heavenly demon shakes his head and explains that Yoan has only used a tiny part of its true power. He adds that those who reach enlightenment through great nature can achieve sword-body unity and fill their swords with their own will. Yoan remembers using sword-body unity and recalls the sword filled with will that the supreme saber god shows him in the combat divine. However, the founding heavenly demon tells him to forget both the mind blade and the sword-body unity he witnesses. Instead, he says he will teach Yoan the greatest sword art ever created, one that only Yoan can learn. When Yoan asks what it is, the founding heavenly demon reveals that it is the sword art capable of completely destroying the world, the transient heavenly demon sword. A few moments later, Yoan practices the technique and is shocked by the result. The founding heavenly demon says he expects nothing less because he only demonstrates it twice. Suddenly, the demon sword trembles and Yoan's strike cracks time and space. The founding heavenly demon praises him, saying he has already mastered the technique. Yoan notices his right arm shaking from the impact and wonders how that is possible inside the mind realm. The founding heavenly demon explains that even there his body still feels the burden because this technique requires both an unbreakable will and a strong body. Yoan watches space splitting apart and says it is incredible. He realizes that the demon god sword art, which he creates with Nano by combining the heavenly demon sword art and the supreme saber divine martial arts, is only possible because he learns from the sword marks left by the founding heavenly demon. He thinks the ancestor truly is a god of martial arts. Suddenly, bright light shines through the cracks in space. Yoan wonders if he attacks too hard, but the founding heavenly demon calmly tells him it is not Yoan's fault. Their time is simply running out. Smiling, he tells Yoan not to feel disappointed because this fragment has used up all its remaining strength. He says their meeting feels shorter than before because too much time has passed, but it is still enough to teach everything he can. Yoan bows deeply and thanks him for his guidance. The ancestor reminds him that such formalities are unnecessary, but Yoan insists that someone who teaches him such an amazing skill deserves respect. He also says the ancestor prepares so much for his successors because of a prophet, making him truly remarkable. Yoan suddenly stops speaking. The founding heavenly demon notices he still has something to ask and urges him to speak because little time remains. Yoan asks who the prophet is. The founding heavenly demon creates a clear 3D image with his chi. Yoan instantly recognizes the man as his future descendant who places the nano machine inside him. Before he can speak, the mind realm starts collapsing. The founding heavenly demon declares that his duty is finished and orders his successor to defeat that greedy enemy and prove the true meaning of being the heavenly demon. Yoan promises he will show the unstoppable power of the heavenly demon. The ancestor laughs confidently and says he completely trusts him. The scene then shifts to Cheongbi Mountain in the northwest, where a fierce battle between fire and ice continues. A giant fire attack destroys the ice walls, but they immediately regenerate. Gulwon fights Jokerondan and Marikium, angrily complaining that the endless ice walls keep returning. Marikium struggles to breathe because the blazing fire burns his lungs. Jokerondan secretly tells him that Gulwon is a complete monster. Although his martial arts are on their level, his true chi is far greater, and he has regenerated continuously for the past hour. Marikium concludes that Gulwon absorbs the fire Kirin spirit chi and says the only way to win is by cutting off his head. Jokerondan agrees, though he admits it is easier said than done. He says he will suppress the flames while Marikium attacks Gulwon's head when an opportunity appears. They rush toward Gulwon together. Gulwon summons blazing flames into his hand, but Jokerondan launches the cold ice heavenly palm secret ultimate ice flow kick, sending a massive wave of ice at him. Gulwon instantly evaporates it, filling the battlefield with thick steam. He curses because the steam blocks his vision again. Marikium uses the chance to appear behind him and swings at his head. Suddenly, a violent explosion of ice and fire erupts. Jokerondan and Marikium are stunned as Gulwon blocks Marikium's sword with his own blade, while stopping Jokerondan's ice palm with his bare hand. Gulwon releases blazing flames, mocks their obvious plan and declares that they are finished. He jumps into the air and uses the Supreme Saber Divine Martial Arts, Flame Dragon's Ascent Flames, creating a huge tornado of fire that crashes toward them. Marikium stares at it in panic and shouts that they must escape, but he cannot finish speaking. Gulwon forms an enormous fireball above them and screams that he will burn them into ashes. Jokerondan tries to create an ice barrier, but suddenly realizes he has no true chi left and cannot finish it. Gulwon immediately throws the giant fireball at them. Marikium doubts his sword chi can stop it but prepares to fight anyway. Then the massive fireball suddenly disappears. Gulwon is completely stunned and wonders what happens. Jokerondan and Marikium are equally shocked. Gulwon cannot understand how his attack vanishes and suspects they use some strange trick. He creates another fireball and mocks them, saying their struggle is meaningless because he can make endless fireballs. Before he finishes speaking, the flames explode in his own hand. The blast burns the nearby trees, and among them stands Yoan with the demon sword, now wearing his nano suit. Jokerondan and Marikium instantly recognize him and sigh with relief. They are safe, and more importantly, Yoan is alive. He arrives just in time to save them from certain death. The moment Gulwon sees him, cold sweat covers his body because of the overwhelming danger he feels. He cannot understand the terrifying feeling, but he knows he must run. He immediately flees in the opposite direction. Something dark chases him, forcing him to stop. A thin black line appears before him, pulling in the wind like a tiny black hole. Gulwon panics as it seems to tear space apart. Before he can react, the black line cleanly cuts his body in half. Yoan has used his new demon sword technique to slice Gulwon perfectly into two pieces. Jokerondan and Marikium remain frozen in shock. Marikium stammers that the cult leader actually cuts through space itself. Yoan recalls the demon sword into his body and looks slightly surprised, saying he only intends to cut off Gulwon's limbs. Meanwhile, northwest of the Cheongbi Mountains, Wanmol continues carrying the Blade God on his shoulders. The Blade God slowly regenerates his badly injured body while keeping all his focus on healing. As Wanmol hurries to escape from Yoan, he notices that his master's bleeding has finally stopped. Seeing his torso steadily recover, he believes the Blade God has expelled most of the terrifying black energy. He wonders what kind of energy could make even the Blade God struggle so much. He also thinks that Gulwon is taking too long, as more than half an hour has already passed. Far behind them, Gulwon's distant flames suddenly disappear, replaced by the same eerie black line. Feeling something dangerous, the Blade God quickly turns around and tells Wanmol to stop so he can look closer. Wanmol immediately stops and asks what is wrong. The Blade God's face fills with both rage and fear as he realizes Yoan has reached an entirely new level of power. He quietly mutters only one name, the Demon God. On the mountain peak, the sun is about to set while Yoan's men continue pulling the White Tiger out of the lake. The cult members shout that they are almost done and urge everyone to use a little more strength. Manhwa orders everyone to pull with all their power. Hyeobong jokes that Manhwa should be doing most of the work because strength is her greatest talent. She angrily asks if he wants to experience her strength himself. Nearby, Yoan's subordinates discuss the remaining bodies. One believes only a few are left, and another reminds everyone that they must cremate them all before sunset, telling them to move faster. Standing beside the frozen lake, Yoan speaks with his grandfather while watching his men. His grandfather praises him, saying Yoan has shown true honor as a martial artist. Yoan explains that he is not doing this for his enemies but for the Eastern Frost God. His grandfather understands. Yoan thinks that the man protected justice in the Changbai Mountains throughout his life, so he cannot let this sacred place be polluted by the corpses of the Blade God's 6 martial clan. He looks at the tombstone marked with the name Akui and believes Akui is truly the greatest martial artist. In his final moments, Akui surpasses both Yoan and the Blade God without a core essence or a nano machine. Through pure human spirit and determination alone, he reaches the highest realm and becomes the true strongest person under heaven of this era. His grandfather asks if they will return to the cult after dealing with the bodies to prepare for the coming campaign. Yoan replies that he must stop somewhere first. When asked where, Yoan explains that he wants to examine the encrypted manuscript copied by his grandfather. He privately believes the original manuscript was written by the Blade God and should reveal how he planned to change the future. Even with such terrible injuries, the Blade God is not someone who dies easily, so they must learn his goal to destroy him permanently. His grandfather says the place is along their route anyway, so they can stop there first. Yoan agrees and says they will cremate the bodies before leaving early the next morning. Suddenly, loud screams rise from below. Yoan immediately senses something is wrong near the white tiger's corpse. One subordinate is blown away and slides across the ice before stopping himself. Before he can recover, he sees another attack coming. Hyeobong jumps in and saves him just in time. The attacker is Manhwa. Hyeobong asks what is happening after seeing her eyes tune the same wild crimson as the enraged white tiger. He wonders why her power has increased so much. Even if she surpasses him physically, his internal energy should still give him the advantage, yet her cultivation has somehow grown enormously. She says nothing and only growls like a beast. Hyeobong notices the black energy surrounding her. While he holds one of her hands, she grabs her axe with the other and prepares a powerful strike. Hyeobong nervously asks if she really intends to attack him with it. After pushing the 6th elder away, he covers his free hand with chi and blocks the axe. He grits his teeth as the impact shakes his entire arm. Even with chi protection, the force nearly crushes him. Realizing Manhwa will not recover soon, he releases his blazing firepower and decides to subdue her first. Holding her axe tightly, he says heating it with flame chi will force her to let go. As the weapon becomes hotter, her hand slowly burns. Suddenly, Wanghul rushes toward them while shouting Manhwa's name. He delivers a powerful kick into Hyeobong's side just as Hyeobong is yelling in frustration about why she refuses to release the axe. The kick interrupts him instantly. Hyeobong stumbles backward, falls to his knees, clutches his side, and realizes his ribs are broken. Looking up, he sees Wanghul surrounded by a terrifying dark aura. Wanghul holds the white tiger's core, and his eyes have become completely blood red, just like the white tiger's when it loses control. Everyone nearby is shocked and asks what is happening and why Wanghul's eyes have changed too. One subordinate studies him closely, and notices the sinister aura is so strong that it is visible with the naked eye. He then realizes this may be happening because of the 2nd core found inside the white wind tiger's stomach. Without warning, Wanghul charges at him and tries to punch through his stomach. The man barely dodges and realizes Wanghul truly intends to kill him. At the same time, Manhwa appears behind him with her axe fully prepared. He notices her at the last second and believes he is about to die. Just before the axe lands, Yoan suddenly appears above them and releases overwhelming pressure, forcing both Manhwa and Wanghul flat onto the ground. Yoan sighs with relief after stopping them in time and reminds himself that he warned everyone to be careful. He lands beside them while the rescued subordinate escapes as quickly as possible. However, Wanghul lets out a savage roar and desperately struggles against Yoan's pressure. Manhwa also fights with all her strength trying to stand and break free. Watching them, Yoan wonders if both the spiritual power and demonic energy inside the core entered their bodies together. He realizes their internal energy has grown far beyond what it became after absorbing the spirit beast's blood, showing how dangerous the demonic energy truly is. With a cold expression, he presses his finger downward and forces both of them deeper into the ground face first. Then he uses magnetic energy to pull the white tiger's core toward himself as it continues releasing a dense black aura. Hyeobong urgently warns his cult leader that the core is too dangerous. The moment Yoan touches the white tiger's core, it immediately begins twisting and changing violently. Yoan sees the strange reaction against his palm and remarks that it is completely out of control. He releases his own overwhelming power, declaring that this level of corruption is far from enough to stop him. His dark aura becomes suffocating. Hyobong watches in awe, thinking that such power is exactly what is expected from the cult leader. To him, the cult leader's terrifying aura is far greater than the demonic energy inside the black core. Soon, the core becomes stable, and the others cheer, saying that the cult leader has completely suppressed the demonic energy, and proving once again that he is on an entirely different level. Yoan then seals the core in ice with the perfected profound cold ice heaven art, explaining that it will no longer release demonic energy. He then turns to Ho Sengwa and Wang Hul, saying that only they remain to be dealt with. The two continue struggling to stand while releasing beast-like roars. A subordinate asks why they are acting like this, and Yoan explains that the demonic energy inside the core is consuming their internal energy. When the subordinate suggests removing it, Yoan says that removing the corrupted internal energy will permanently damage their dantians. The subordinate worries they will instead become evil demonic humans. Yoan repeats the words, wonders if they really will become demonic humans, and decides that it may not be a bad idea. As he stretches out his hand, he remembers an earlier conversation with his grandfather. His grandfather asks if they are returning to the cult to prepare for the coming campaign, and Yoan replies that he first needs to study the coded manuscript his grandfather copied. At the same time, Hyobong struggles to drag the white tiger's heavy corpse from the frozen lake while complaining about whoever threw it into the water. Nearby, Ho Sangwa, Wang Hul and the sixth elder search the body for the hidden core. Sangwa doubts whether a core is really inside, but Wang Hul insists that if the cult leader says so, it must exist. They eventually find it and realize it is the white wind tiger's secondary core. Wang Hul notices its ominous aura. The sixth elder warns them that the cult leader says touching it directly is dangerous, so they must protect their hands with chi. Wang Hul covers his hands with chi and grabs the core, but the corruptive dark chi instantly pierces his defense, enters his body, and takes control. He panics, realizing it destroys his chi and spreads too quickly for him to expel it. Seeing this, Sangwa rushes to help and grabs his shoulder, but the dark chi immediately spreads into her arm as well. She feels strange emotions flooding her mind until nothing remains except hatred and rage. Both instantly lose control. Back in the present, the white tiger's energy is still inside Sangwa, but Yoan pours his enormous chi into her body. As she slowly regains consciousness, she wonders what new force is entering her body, and realizes it is an even purer and denser demonic energy than the one consuming her before. Yoan continuously sends his immense chi into both warriors, forcefully suppressing and controlling the raging white tiger chi. The others notice that the pair, who were rampaging moments ago, are now calmly circulating their chi and appear to be controlling the black energy. Yoan stands, satisfied that they are stable. He believes the special chi circulation method he creates by adapting the mental cultivation technique of the heavenly demon sword art allows them to control demonic chi. From this point onward, everything depends on them. If they completely stabilize the corruptive force, they will permanently keep the spirit beast's great spiritual power. As night passes, both warriors finally open their eyes and regain full consciousness. Sangwa happily notices that their eyes have returned to normal and asks if they are all right. Another cult member senses that both now possess completely different auras. Wang Hul is amazed by the changes in his body, feeling that his strength has surpassed its former limits. When he clenches his fist, he realizes that combining this new power with his sword chi could destroy anything before him. Yoan walks over and calmly says that they are finally awake. Both kneel immediately and deeply apologize. Wang Hul admits that he ignores the cult leader's warning and causes this mistake. Yoan says he does not blame him because he never expects the sealed demonic energy to be so powerful, and admits he should have recovered the core himself. Wang Hul bows again, thanking Yoan for preventing a disaster through his great mercy. Sangwa also thanks him and asks a question. She explains that after using the special chi circulation method, the demonic energy settles inside her dantian, but she does not know what it truly is. Yoan explains that the power is called demonic chi. Unlike the pure energies of Buddhism and Taoism, it is a completely destructive force. He names it demonic chi after the legendary heavenly demonic chi. This moment becomes the true beginning of the demonic humans within the heavenly demon cult. Yoan looks at his followers and thinks that if every warrior in the cult masters demonic chi, they will easily defeat any future enemy with spirit beast power. This new foundation, built upon demonic chi, becomes the seed for the cult's future. Just as the legendary heavenly demon founder prepares for a distant future crisis, Yoan now plants the ultimate foundation for the future of the demonic cult, a future that will continue even after he is gone.